Hello everyone, I am Master Blue of Taekwondo Culture Network. In this video, I will tell you the key argument of why Taekwondo is originated from the traditional martial art Taekkyon of Korea historically. Key point will focus on a single simple argument only. Let me suggest an analogy for each explanation. For the first, think the Korea's period on the Japanese colony. Then, suppose several Korean people went to Japan to learn technology of making airplane. For example, during their study, they, in their spare time, attended Taekkyon and learned Japanese language. They studied there for 4 years and learn Japanese language 1 or 2 hours a day as a hobby. And later they got back home to Korea and made a school called Taekkyon. It is a similar name. Everyone can see it is from this name. And in the Taekkyon, they made a new language called Koreanese. And suppose it became the official language of Korea. Now then think, is the Koreanese language from Japanese or from previous Korean? You have to think a single criterion to make a good judgment about this matter. It is which language of Koreanese is more like between the original Korean and the Japanese language. This is universal criterion to judge with in the history of culture. When you judge the history of art, you have to see which kind of art it is more like. And when you judge the history of music, you have to see which kind of music it is more like. Suppose Koreanese is more like the original Korean. Why? Because Korean people made it. Then the game is over. It is very clear that Koreanese is originated from Korean. But you may see somebody else protest, saying they studied in Japan in their past and they studied Japanese language in their universities. So the Koreanese is from Japanese language and not from Korean. But as you see, they are all implausible. Please think, they studied foreign language for 1 or 2 hours a day as a hobby, and how much could they learn it? Now let me tell you the point of Taekwondo history. Likewise, it was the Korea's time under Japanese colony, and several Korean people went to Japan to study their own thesis. Some of them, in the course of their study in Japan, learned karate in some dojangs like Shotokwan. To be exact, they practiced karate as their hobby in the course of their study about another majors. And then they came back to Korea and made blah blah kwan. The name is like the Japanese dojang. Everyone can see it is from the Japanese term. And there, they made a new martial arts called Taekwondo. And this is the national martial arts of Korea. Now then, is Taekwondo from karate or Korean traditional martial arts? For the exact judgment of this problem, you have to see only one thing. Which is Taekwondo more like between Taekkyon and karate? Let me tell you again that this is the universal criterion to judge with in the history of culture. Suppose Taekwondo is more like Taekkyon. Why? It was made by Korean people then game is over. It is very clear that Taekwondo is originated from Taekkyon. Watch this video and you will see how much Taekwondo is like Taekkyon actually. And as a matter of fact, many academic papers that suggested Taekwondo is historically from Karate discuss why Taekwondo is so much like Taekkyon overall. It means those who believe Taekwondo is historically from Karate cannot but accept the fact that Taekwondo and Taekkyon are very much similar to each other. But some people argue against this conclusion. They point that the masters studied in Japan for several years and they practiced karate in their students' period. Therefore, Taekwondo is originated from karate. But this argument is all out of the logical plausibility. Think and answer to this question. How much can a man learn a martial art with practice of several years as a hobby? Almost nothing. In this step, some people will argue somehow, maybe. Let me discuss some of them here. First, is language same as martial arts? Some may argue they are different. I say yes, for they both share some traits of historical transmission and flow. Suppose you, an English native, studied French for 1 or 2 years for hobby. Then you cannot but speak almost English mixed with only several French words. Exactly likewise, you cannot learn much of martial art with 1 or 2 year practice for hobby. See a Western Taekwondo practitioner who began it in their 20s or later. Their kicks are mostly not like Korean Taekwondo men's kick. Even foreign Taekwondo masters modify Taekwondo motions somewhat their own way, although they have been practicing it for more than several decades. Some people argue that the first Taekwondo masters in 1950s have not learned Taekkyon. No. Actually, we can find records they learned Taekkyon and researched it. But more important point is the following. Taekkyon is a folk martial arts. It means it must have been transmitted along the way of folk culture. Every Korean can do Taekkyon or Taekwondo kick without conscious learning. It is like the case every local people speak dialect of their town. Those who argue Taekwondo is originated from karate suggest proofs of similar names of kwan, dobok, belt system, and so on. But now, I believe they are out of the plausible point. Let me discuss one more. I saw somebody that suggests the following argument. It is made by Korean, cannot explain everything. So, let me stress key point of my argument. It is not only that Taekwondo is made by Korean people, but also that Taekwondo itself is very similar to Taekkyon. Koreans made a new language. But if it is very similar to English, it must be originated from English. And if it is very similar to French, it must be originated from French. It must be a plausible fact. Now think. Koreans made a new language Koreanese, and it is very similar to Korean. Then, it seems very clear that Koreanese is originated from Korean. Exactly likewise, Koreans made a new martial arts and it is very similar to the traditional martial art Taekkyon. Then it is also very clear that it was originated from Taekkyon, whatever they had learned before. This is the first and most important assumption. This is the way how every historian thinks and judges historical facts. I have been training and studying Taekwondo for more than 30 years and found out that most of misunderstanding on Taekwondo history comes from the ignorance and indolence of Taekwondo researchers. There are many Taekwondo professors who write Taekwondo history with argument that Taekwondo is originated from karate, but none of them study the history of culture, art, music, and whatever. And none of them has the language ability of reading Asian letters, Chinese language, Japanese or English, German, and so on. Most of them find some documents at random and argue their idea as if they found a great truth of history without careful reflection. You have a right to believe what you want, but if you want truth of Taekwondo history, please read some books written by reliable researchers and study your own materials on it. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and click like. Thank you very much.